Peace and blessings, family. This is your brother, asarimhotep, with the Martin Delaney Center for Egyptology. And today is Umoja, Sunday, May the 26th, 2024. And we have a good show for you today and presentation. This is the Mbongi. And we're going to continue, in many ways, this is part 3 of the conversation dealing with the grammar of the classifiers in the ancient Egyptian language. And so we are specifically addressing the word Kemet with the seated man and seated woman hieroglyphs that you see on your screen on the top left and the right. And so this is we're going to be talking about another contention that has been brought up regarding the source of this particular glyph, and we are going to address that today. And so the title of this presentation is Giving Life to Kemet and the Personification of the State. So we're going to deal with all that and more when we return in just a moment. And we are back. I just want to give a shout out to each and every one of you who are listening live to this broadcast. And of course, those of you who have made yourselves known in the chat. So peace and blessings to Brother Masoni, all the way out in Azania, checking out the Mbongi. Always glad to have you in the audience or on the panel. And we got our good sister Tamika One in the building. Peace and love to you. Sister Gigi, all the way out on the West Coast. Thank you for joining. Uh, I guess early this morning, since it's still AM where you're at. So love and light to you and to Dr. Rob. Peace and blessings to you as well. And lastly, to Black Hat, peace and blessings to you. Now I am on my I'm on two computers right now, and I'm on my cell phone that you can hear me on, and but I'll be doing the presentation from the computer. Now, for some reason, it has been going in and out with the connection, so this is why I decided to come on the cell phone. So if it goes out, know that I'm still on, just on the cell phone, and once the internet connection comes back, the presentation should be here. But just a quick microphone check, and I know there's going to be a time delay. I'm sitting out here in the park actually today. It's a good day out here in Philadelphia. And so if you can hear me, can you just press one in the chat really well? Because I'm fighting against, what do you call this? It's a spring behind me with some rushing water coming out. So if you kind of hear the background now, so I'm trying to make sure that it's not too loud that it distracts me, excuse me, or distracts you all from listening. So just let me know if you can hear me well, and I appreciate each and every one of you. So I'm sorry to see some ones come in now, and just want to say thank you for reaffirming that y'all can hear me well. Just need to know if the background noise is too loud. Just let me know, and I'll try to find an alternative to getting going here. So, um, as I stated earlier, the title of the presentation is Giving Life to Kemet, subtitled The Personification of the State. And so, let me see. And, you'll be able to join the conversation. So I have pinned the link to the top in the YouTube chat for those of you who are watching on YouTube. Those of you who are watching on X, if you're going to try to join the conversation, a little later you'll just have to come over here to YouTube for the link. Now, so what is happening is, of course, I got to take it back. Way back in 1974 at the Cairo Symposium, Dr. Shekhar Diab challenged the conventional interpretation of the meaning of the place name Kemet. And while he agreed that the place name originated with a word in the ancient Egyptian lexicon that we colloquially pronounce as Kim, meaning black, he argued that the place name Kemet actually refers to black people and not black land, as is conventionally argued by Egyptologists. And so since 1974, and it's 2024, so it's been a minute, basically 50 years, and also, about 50 years now, this debate has ensued as a result of Dr. Shekhar Diab's initial arguments at the Cairo Symposium. So on the bottom of the right-hand screen is the inspiration for the argument by Dr. Shekhar Diab that is a variant of the place name Kemet, and instead of the common 049 so-called city glyph as the classifier or the determinative, what you see is a seated man and a seated woman with three strokes underneath them. Now, the standard interpretation in Egyptology is that when you see something like this, that the word which precedes the determinatives speaks to the human class. So it's speaking about human beings. And the three strokes here is supposed to represent the plural. So this is why it has been interpreted in the Egyptology books as the Egyptians, and a number of early dictionaries as the Egyptians, whereas Km.t more specifically says black people. And so this is the uh, basis of the argument. And so, of course, it is with the help of my Patreon members that we are able to have these conversations and guests. And I got a prominent Egyptologist coming on the program in about 2 weeks. And so, when it gets closer to that time, I will make the announcement to our Patreon members, and they'll be the first to see the interview. He is currently living in Africa, and so it is going to be a long distance conversation. And so I'll let y'all know more about that in as the time gets closer. So, to continue, with these good professional interviews and information, as well as some other things, consider joining the Patreon. I think like the lowest is $5, saying per month. A little bit goes a long way. So that is the address, patreon.com/asarimhotep. Or you can visit my website at oserimhotep.com and, purchase a book or something like that. That as well helps to fund this channel. So let's continue. And of course, my latest book, which I address much of what we say in here today, and just regarding the etymology of Kemet. This is my latest text, Race and Identity in Ancient Egypt, Volume 1, towards a meaning for the place name Kemet. And so you can see that as well. And so you'll be learning more and more about Shikam as a paradigm. We'll skip that for the moment, and we'll get back to our conversation. So just as a recap, the argument is on the etymology and the meaning of the name Kemet. And so does it mean black land, as argued by many Egyptologists, or does it mean black people, as argued by Sheikh Joke and his school of Egyptology? And so what we rarely talk about are the different forms of the place name Kemet. And while everybody may be used to number three, seeing the number three variant of the name Kemet, many may not be familiar with numbers 1 and 2 as regards to the forms of the place name Kemet. So I have the classifiers or the determinatives on the right hand side. And so the N23 and N36 are supposed to be canals, but they're really not canals per se. They're really the two banks, and with the water going through. And so it's from that you can look at it and make it a canal, or you can make it a irrigation channel. So whether you're talking about a river or an irrigation channel or a canal, it's still the same function. It's water traveling between two barriers, and that's what you see on the screen right there. So it's letting you know here that Kemet, in this respect, has to deal with some kind of land with the presence of water. And that's what we argue for the 049 glyph. We're not going to go into that debate today. That's not what we're going to deal with. Y'all should know that argument by now. And if you do not, I do encourage you again to purchase the book, Race and Identity in Ancient Egypt, Volume 1, where I go and give all the details, of course, with sources as well. So what we are debating here comes from this papyrus. This is the actual papyrus here, or parts of the papyrus. This is just a good shot of, a hymn to, Ursatin III or Sesostris III. It is written originally in a hieratic, script. And so for better use of or better ease of viewing it, because the original is a handwritten script, uh, they converted to the hieroglyphic script that we see here. So what I have in red is the word Kemet, and with the seated man and seated woman with the three strokes that we saw earlier. So it's two, maybe three times in this particular papyrus, but this is the only location where the word Kemet, to our knowledge, is written in this map. So this also causes a lot of problems because it doesn't allow us to it properly interpret it based upon a common context. So you would need at least four or five other sources, from various time periods with Egypt or Kemet spelled just like this for us to have a more definitive argument for its usage and meaning. But since this is the only papyrus that has Kemet written like this, that into itself has been a source of debate as well, or contention, I should say. So, in the last program that I did, I talked about the grammar of the classifiers. So, as there is a grammar for sentences and syntax, there is also a method that the ancient Egyptians employed when writing the hieroglyphs. And so while I won't get into the details now, please go back to the last video on this channel where we talk about meronymic and taxonymic uh, schemas. These are ideas coming out of the linguistic field of semiotics, and which is in the larger subfield in terms of semantics, right, and symbology. So what we're arguing here is that the male and female classifiers are the meronymic in relation to the abstract or place taxonomic classifier, which is at the end, right? So let me continue. So this is a transliteration of the hymn to Sesostris III, which is from the 12th dynastic period, plate 3, lines 3 through 5, right? And so how we transliterate the hieroglyphs using the modern keyboard is what you see at the top, and at the bottom is the translation. So it says, it was after he had ruled. So the hymn is to Sesostris, who was supposed to be coming to and visiting Lahun, where this papyrus was found at. And so it is the scribe is talking about the king. And so for those of you who are familiar with Yoruba tradition in culture and language, you'll be more familiar with the concept of an oriki. And an oriki is like a praise poem or a hymn that can not only be done for a king or a priest, but just for family members, your parents. You might do an oriki for your parents, or you might do a hymn to a friend of yours, right? So the hymns or the orikis can be done for anybody practically. But what you see in ancient Egypt is when they're doing their quote unquote orikis, they're primarily doing them for deities and kings. So in this case, this is an oriki, thus a hymn to Sesostris III. So it's describing his attributes, um, and what he's capable of doing, what he has done, what he does, right? So it says it was after he had ruled Egypt or Kemet, that's that Heka Inef, Kemet, that you see right here at the top, Heka meaning to rule. And after he had put the desert or Desheret in his company, that he came to us. It was after he had protected the two lands. The two lands is this word here, Tawi, and it has a double suffix, a double marking suffix, letting you know it's a dual, or we probably more properly say a dual suffix, right? Now, so the two lands. So Egypt was known by many names: Tamari, Kemet, Ta, and Tawi, and Edebwi, which we'll see here in a second. Had protected the two lands. And after he had pacified the two banks, that's Edebwi here. So again, just like Ta, Edeb, meaning shores or the bank, it has the dual suffix here, we, that he came to us. So understand what he's saying. Remember that the king is coming to Lahun, the city, the village, the community. So it was after he had ruled the larger territory and had put the desert in his company, meaning he had incorporated the Desheret into his rulership, right? That he came to us, meaning the people of Lahun. It was, which is in the larger Kahun. So sometimes you kind of see it mixed, Lahun, Kahun, but they're almost synonymous in the text. So it was after he had protected the two lands and after he had pacified the two banks that he came to us. It was after he had caused Egypt or Kemet to live and after he had removed its needs that he came to us, right? So if you wonder where we're getting the title of this presentation, that it comes from this line here, Sa'ank in F. This is a Sajeb in F construction, verb construction. And so Sa'ank in F, Kemet. So S is the causative prefix. Unk is the word to live. And then N makes it past tense, and F is the third person singular marker, pronoun, so to speak. Unk in F, he caused to live Kemet, or he gave Kemet life, or he enlivened Kemet. There's many ways in which you can interpret this, right? So, and after he had removed its needs, that he came to us. So in the last presentation, we dealt with that its needs. So this is the feminine singular pronoun marker here, suffix marker here, right? On the word needs or whatnot. That's Shanu here, right here. So he had removed the obstacles from Kemet, right? So the it's here lets us know that it's not talking about people, as Diop and others have tried to interpret, because the pronoun here, the suffix pronoun here would have been sin, S-N, not simply S. So N is a plural marker in Egyptian, as well as the more common one that people know of as W. So they add the N plural marker to S, and it's sin, the feminine they, them, their, right? So if you wouldn't say, for example, New Yorkers, he went to the mall on Saturday in great droves. That wouldn't make any sense, because if I'm saying New Yorkers, I'm saying that in the plural, right? And so I wouldn't use a singular third person, first person singular he when referring to New Yorkers. I would say they if I'm speaking about them. They went to the mall in droves, New Yorkers, right? Because I'm speaking in plural. But in this instance, is Kemet the state. That's why I say, you know, um, for example, if I was to say Donald Trump put a fence around New York, he put a double fence around its borders, right? You see what I did there? All I did was replace New York with its, because I'm speaking about it as an entity and not a person, right? So help you to understand. But even that, I've already addressed that, which is what we see in the next slide here. So I'll just leave this up for a little bit, so that while people are reviewing, they have enough space to pause it, so that they can read it themselves, right? So the question is now that is being brought up is the reference to the Sa'ank. So if we go back, right, we say Sa'ank NF, Kemet. So there are those trying to argue that you can't give life to the state. You can only give life to people, right? So, and the precedent from the next line in the text, still speaking about the king, it says, he has come, he has given the nobles, the pa'at that I have in here in red, life, sa'ank right here. So that same sa'ank NF that is used in the word, before the word kemet, that phrase is being used again for this word pot, meaning the nobles. So these are human beings, right? He has given breath to the throats of the people, the rekayet. And then, it continues, he has come, he has trampled the foreign lands, he has struck the nomads, ignorant of his fear. He has come, he has whatever, his border, he has rescued the oppressed. He has come, our children, we may bury our old, then question mark, right? Because some parts are broken off. So it causes some issues of interpretation. But so it is this. So what we're addressing here today is this notion that only the people, because they can be given life, right, or be enlivened. That's not a fact according to the ancient Egyptian text. And so what they're trying to argue, because the people who are making this argument are trying to justify interpreting the word Kemet here as a word for Egyptians, and more specifically, the black people. That's what they're trying to argue. So the king came after he had united Egypt and pacified the banks from harm and all that. That he came and united all the black people. That's what they're trying to argue. And so their precedence is that very next line where it says, he has given, and that's, he has come and has given life to the nobles, and he has given breath to the people. So you see people being referenced here. And so more specifically, the people of Egypt, right? So he's not talking about the world in this sense. He's talking about people that live within the borders of Egypt, or ancient Egypt, I should say, right? So we're going to deal with that, and I'm gonna show that that there's no justification for that, especially if we have a long tradition of the ancient Egyptians uh, giving life to Egypt, the state. So before we move forward, I want to, kind of define some things. So many of you, of course, may be familiar with the word Ankh. Just like the word Kemet, there are many Ankhs in the ancient Egyptian language. But in this case, we're dealing with the Ankh that derives from the word for person or human being, which is colloquially described as life. And so when you add the causative to it, the prefix, then it's to cause to live or to give life or to enliven. So the first definition of sa'ant is to make live, to perpetuate, to nourish, right? So it's like if I'm feeding you, if I'm, I'm a woman and I'm breastfeeding my child, I am nourishing my child. I am sa'anking my child. I am nourishing my child. I'm causing my child to live, to enliven my child. That's what's going on. So you have sa'ank, one who sustains. So there may be a missing, W, or it may be understood because y'all may not be able to see this really well, and I'm pretty sure that you won't be able to see my mouse because I've uploaded the presentation to StreamYard, so y'all don't see my mouse. But if you look here in the second row, and that last glyph right there, that's of a noble, of a human being holding the wasp scepter, and so this is a person here, one who sustains. So a mother, a father, a king, because a king is the father of the nation. Which, if you have my book Nesubiti, I have a whole chapter on that. Across Africa, a king is considered a father and or a mother, and it could be any gender. It could be a male or a female. They both can be considered a father or a mother, depending on what the role of a father or a mother is in that particular ethnic group or state, right? So, lastly is the word sa'ant, endowment or revenue. Now, this is an important one because the exchange of money also makes to live, helps to perpetuate, and helps to nourish. So, we can have another conversation about commerce, business, economy, for which is one of the definitions that I give to Kemet in my text. And I'll show you how the word for banks and the word for water channel also becomes the word for marketplace and economy in African languages. And I argue that again for ancient Kemet as well. So just that recap. So if you see me or if you hear me say to make live or to nourish or sustain, I'm using it interchangeably in regards to this word, right? So, there's not going to be any linguistics in this lecture here. I'm just going to be reading from the examples provided by the TLA, the famous TLA that we introduced to this community over 14, 15 years ago, right? And so, it's in the second form or second major form right now. And so, you can find these in the TLA, these particular references. So the first example that I am going to show comes from the, excuse me, let me go back, the teachings of Keti. And so this one is going to be talking about the Nile River itself. And I'm gonna show some from some other papyri as well. So I'm seeing the comment from Jehuti Ma'at. Yes, that is their argument. They're arguing that the nation cannot be enlivened. That this is in reference to people and only people. And that's why we have to interpret Kemet in the Kahun papyrus as Egyptians or the black people, because you can only enliven people. That's the argument. Yes, that's what we're addressing today. So hopefully everything comes out clear on your screen. Uh, so so when you go into the TLA, sometimes the data is given to you back in German, so you can right click on your screen and click translate, and that's what I've done. So if the for those who are German speakers, if it is not like a 100% accuracy in the translation, the translation is good enough for our purposes here, because what we need to be translated correctly, in fact, is translated correctly in all the examples uh, here. So now, so in this text here, the teaching of Keti, it is, and so the remember the first example that we gave was an oriki or a hymn to the king Sesostris III. So now this is an oriki or a hymn, praise poem to the Nile River itself, which is known by many names, but one of the more well-known names is Hapi, right? And so it says, "Hail, O Hapi, who comes forth from the earth, who comes to revive Egypt." So you see, and I don't know why I don't have this uh, highlighted. I should, but you see here in the transliteration, Sa'unk Kemet, right? And so Sa'unk is given here, and then actually the word Kemet is missing from this papyrus, right? And this is from Dynasty 18. It's from the 18th dynasty. So this is why I made sure that I had other examples here. But there's so many versions of this hymn, they knew that the word Kemet was there. So that's why. So I wanted to show this first and then get this out of the way. And I don't know, if there's a time delay, but Brother Wajahu says, if you haven't already, you can go to the hymn to the now, which I'm on right now. So so I know there's a time delay. So I don't know to what extent he is joining the conversation, or if he's kind of reviewing backwards, which Ujawu likes to do. And remember that you can join the conversation, and the link is given at the top, right? So 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 if you say revive, enlighten, given life, they're all the same thing. This is Sa'ant right here, Sa'ant Kemet. So let's go to the next version. So this next one is for Amenhotep II. This is the Papyrus London in the Brooklyn Museum, form 10477, right? So in this, so I have the hieroglyphs highlighted here in the green squares. So it should be like this for the rest of the script, right, that you can see at the top. So it says this text here, and what dynasty did they? Is this? I think this may be 18th dynasty as well, I believe. So it says from this Book of the Dead, this Papyrus of London, "I am the great one of the red crown that is on the crown of the splendor that animates the two lands, and humanity through the flame of its mouth that saves Ra from Apophis." So you see the word here, Sa'unk, in front of the word Tawi. So remember what I said earlier, that the ancient Egypt was known by many names. So you can say Kemet, you can say Ta Mary, you can say Edebwi, the two banks, and you can say Tawi, the two lands. So this is one of the various ways in which you can write Tawi, the two lands, that is highlighted in the green, right? So this text here is saying that that animates, that enlivens, that nourishes, that revitalizes, that revives Tawi, Kemet, Egypt. Even though they're using the word Tawi, the two lands. So it's the same concept. So we're going to go back and forth between Kemet and Tawi, right? And when you see this Tawi with the do in the transliteration, that is just standing for do. For dual. So the du after ta right here in the transliteration under the hieroglyphs, after you see Sa'anket, right? Ta, and then it's going to say do for dual, meaning the two lands. But for some reason, sometimes when you right click and translate on Chrome, on Google Chrome, that word do means you in German. And so it'll say ta you. So if you see that on the slide, just know that it's really supposed to be this du here, meaning dual in the text. So we can see here that Sa'ant applies clearly to the land, right? The place, the country known as Tawi. And nobody is going to debate. Nobody's going to debate that Tawi doesn't mean Egypt. The two lands, it doesn't refer to the state of Egypt. And so let's continue. So this is another text here. This is now Amenhotep III, or during the reign of Amenhotep III, another book of the dead. So it says, I am the one with the great red crown. It's the same thing, just a different text. Who sits at the crown of the shining one, who enlivens the two lands. Sa'ant, the two lands. So the first one was Sa'anket, the two lands, Tawi, and this one is just Sa'ant, Tawi. So livens the two lands. So this is a third source right here of this particular concept. Yeah, I figured that at Brother Wujawu. As I said, just knowing you and conversing with you, you more than likely was kind of reviewing before you caught up to the live. So now we'll continue. So now we're going to go to the hymn to Aten during the 19th dynasty, right? So this is Akhenaten here and his wife and his two daughters in the frame here. And so this is said several times. So now this is another kind of section or hymn to Aten. To Hapi. So it says Hapi, the Nile, flows daily. That's Rod Neb, sun or day, and then every. So it's like sun every day or daily, right? Sa'ant Kemet. I have it highlighted here in the green. You can clearly see Kemet. So the Nile flows daily, revitalizing, nourishing Kemet. This notion of revitalizing and nourishing, especially from the waters of the Nile, is very important because why is Hapi able to do this? Because Kemet is a riparian land that gets enlivened by the Nile, right? So here's another text that you cannot mistake, that they are giving life to Kemet. In other texts, they will replace Kemet with Tawi, the two lands. And as we continue, it's just going to go back and forth. So here's the next one. Same time period. Amenhotep IV, aka Akhenaten. You know, homage to Wa'en Ra, the God who creates mankind and provides for the two lands, gives life to the two lands. So now, instead of the king or the Nile River, in this case, it is Ra. Well, technically to Aten. So I think this is Ra. So this is translated as Ra, the one in the one of Ra, or one of Ra, right? So is the God who creates mankind and provides, enlivens, gives life, Sa'unk, Tawi, the two lands, right? So, let's go to another one. So here's another hymn to the Nile, right? So this one's from the 19th to 20th dynasty. Hail, O Hapi, who came forth from the earth. This text is live, so you can compare this to the last hymn to the Nile that I showed, and that's how they're able to know even with that missing part is broken, because there are other variants of the same text that the ancient Egyptians repeated, right? And this one's more clear. So, hail, O Hapi. This is another text. It's from another source. Hold on. I think it is again. So let me know if there was a break. So I'm gonna just hold off just for a second, just in case the internet connection is severed for some reason. But here we go. All right. So again, this is another text with the same text. So, hail, O Hapi, who came forth from the earth, come to give life, to enliven Kemet. So you see, we keep going back and forth between giving life, enlivening Kemet, and Tawi, still referring to the same country, the same territory, the same space, right? So here's another text. And so keep in mind that I'm highlighting the important parts in the green. You can see that these are different texts that I'm referring to here, because some parts are missing in one text, which you can see in the other, and which is more full in the other text, right? So here's another one. Hail, O Hapi, who came forth from the earth. That's the Ta that you see here on the top left corner right here. Ta, come to revive Kemet, to enliven Kemet, to nourish Kemet, right? It's the same. So let's go to another text, right? So this one is actually coming from the Roman period. So still to Hapi. So even as late as the Roman period, recitation by Hapi of the South, father of the gods in the two caves, who brings the double country life, Tawi, that you see highlighted in the green, right? Like I'm purposely giving all of these examples so there can be no mistaken that the state is what's being referred to when the king or a deity is giving life to it. It's revitalizing, that's nourishing it. It's the state, the country, the land, right? So now here's an example with Horus giving life to Egypt, right? So this one is at the time frame of Sethos the First, and it's talking about the war against Yanuam and Lebanon. This is during the 19th dynastic period. It says, "Oh Horus, who gives life, Sa'antawi, to the two lands. You are like Manchu over every foreign land." You know, and Manchu is a war deity. So you're like the war deity over the two lands, right? So let's continue. There's a same time period, but this is another text. So great is your power, Lord of the gods, which you have brought far into the foreign land, and you have bowed it down beneath. It's saying you have bowed it, meaning the foreign lands, down beneath the feet of your son Horus, who gives. So this is a different, speaking to a different deity, but still referencing Horus. Horus, who gives life to the two lands, to Sa'antawi, right? And so I'm exhausted. So now we're going to the king again. So this is Ramesses II, also giving life to Kemet, right? So, speaking of Ramesses II, warrior of the Anak, a strong bull like Seth, a Manchu, right, or a warrior, right? The son of Manchu, the god of war, who confronts the Nemo people. Strong ruler, watchful like the horizontal, therefore a falcon god. Why did I say the horizontal? That's one of those translation things. It should be the horizon, or what you see there, the Km.t, dealing with the one belongs to the horizon, right? A falcon god, son of the land of Kemet, and you see Kemet written up there on the second row in the transliteration. Moon of Egypt, shining sun did for the Rekiet people who live at the site of its rays. The long-lived one with great kingship, many said festivals and numerous miracles, useful for Upper Egypt, beloved of Lower Egypt, who what? Sa'antawi, with his food, therefore who supplies. Remember that supplies is a synonym for who nourishes, right? So who nourishes, who supplies, who enlivens Tawi with his food, the king of Upper and Lower Egypt, Ra, the son of Ra, Ramesses. Let me read that actually. Ramesu Amen the to whom life is given. So life is given to Kemet, and the king also receives life, right? So we continue. I am Osiris in, so kind of a standard text for Osiris. I mean for Kemet. So justified in voice, who is safe on earth. I give praise to your beautiful face when you rise on the horizon of heaven. And I praise this when he sets on his mountain to give life to the two lands of Tawi. Dynasty 19, Book of the Dead Project, right? even as late as Julius Caesar. When Julius Caesar took over Kemet, what did they say of him? Master of Quebec is his name. Talking about Caesar, who gives life to the two lands, Tawi, on who enlivens this. So that's the end of the presentation. There's not much to it. It didn't want to be long, but I just wanted to show why, to show the presence, why you can't interpret. So that's just another reason why you cannot interpret. Let's go back to it when we go to the Kahun papyrus. Right? Let's go all the way back. What's going on here? Why is it? I don't know what's going up with this screen yard. Okay, so when we go back here to the Kahun papyrus, and it says, you know, it was after he had ruled Kemet, and after he had put the desert in his company, that he came to us, meaning the people of Lahun. It was after he had protected the two lands, and after he had pacified the two banks, that he came to us. It was after he had caused Kemet to live, and after he had removed its needs. It's the personification of the state. So just like I showed in the other presentation on the day before yesterday, I believe, that when you see the seated man and the seated woman on the place names, this is exactly what they mean. It is just it's denoting a population center, a state, or a place. It cannot, by the grammar and by the precedents of the other text, which uses the same language in the same way, that you can interpret this any other thing than Kemet, the way that it is written. And even in the TLA, they had to have a commentary on it because the grammar only allows for them to render it Kemet in the singular. But they, because of the presence of the seated man and seated woman hieroglyphs, this is exactly why in some texts, like for example in Herman and Grandpa Warter books, that you will see it as the Egyptians. And I see that our good brother Smash has joined the conversation. So I'm adding you now. Peace and blessings. Welcome to the Mbongi.
Peace, peace. What's up, Asar? Long time.
Long time indeed. What's good? What's good?
Yeah. You was making some good points, but I think you was kind of mischaracterizing what I was saying about the Sa'ank argument. Not that we can't find it ever used that way, but particularly up from the beginning of its use up until that time period. My argument is that no ancient Egyptian text ever used Sa'ank to talk about a state type situation, a nation, or polity. Now, when you just cited it from Simra, I think you went to Seti the First and then Ramses. We understand that the semantic range of the term had been expanded, but when we talk about Simra Set's text, we can't find any evidence of this term being used for anything other than the people. That's all I was. I wasn't trying to bum rush your set. I just wanted to clarify that that was my argument.
I understand. And, of course, we'll just have the disagreement. Uh, but, from what I can see here, and the way that, and I only use, how should I say, I'm only focused on, in this presentation, the word, the phrase Sa'ank and F, or Sa'ank, whatever, in relationship to the state. Now, when you just go into the various texts, you'll see Sa'ank being applied to a whole host of things, to people's names. So, this is for those familiar with African traditions. You know that the calling of an ancestor's name causes that person to live. And they explicitly say this in a number of texts. So this can be applied to people's names. It's applied also to body parts, like when someone has lost a ligament, or lost mobility of a ligament, or there's an issue with a body part, right? They'll prescribe some medicines and some words of power and things, all to revitalize those vessels or organs and the like. This phrase is used in all types of manner, and so it would not be out of pocket for it to apply to the state. And so that's the context in which we're arguing it here, that this phrase to enliven the state is within the ancient Egyptian tradition, even if this is one of the earliest examples. Now we got to keep in mind that, again, the TLA does not have all text, and so this is why we got to be careful when we say that there is no, right, um, because there's unpublished material, and there's material that I know that I have that isn't on the TLA, which they're working on. Luckily, they got funding and people to continue to add, but they're continually adding stuff. And sooner or later, we may get another Kemet with a seated man and seated woman somewhere in some obscure text that they just haven't brought yet, right? Um, but that's the nature of the conversation. So glad you came on, and just to let everybody know again, the chat, excuse me, the link to join the panel, to continue this discussion, is in the chat, and it is pinned to the particular topic. So, was there anything in addition that you wanted to state, Brother Smash?
No, it was that. I just wanted to clear that up, and then there was one more. Oh, yes, about the S issue. You are correct grammatically, but we have to. So when we're talking about the difference between the suffix S and the sin, would mean they, there. Now, when we analyze that text, we can see that they only wrote an S, just like you stated. But I think that the TLA is not off on a limb translating it as there, because we can cite other instances where whoever the scribe was, he intended to relay they or them, but he only wrote an S. And so I took screenshots of these instances, and maybe at a later date we'll be able to share them. But that's just so we know, it's not mandated that we put an it or her or hers when we see the feminine suffix s, because we have other instances where we can clearly show that they meant they or theirs and they only wrote an S. But yeah, thanks for letting me on, and I'm gonna just listen from the chat for the rest of the show.
No problem, indeed. And yeah, we'll have to do that. So, big up and respect to our good brother Smash for joining the conversation. And again, for those who want to, ask a question, I'm going to be scrolling up to see if there was any commentary or questions that uh, can be addressed or that may need to be addressed. Uh, so I'm just picking a random point. Let me see. And if you haven't already, make sure that each and every one of you that is right. Make sure that you hit the like button. And if you are new to this channel, consider hitting the subscribe button. You will help with our numbers and getting the word out when we have these important discussions. And so let me go back here. Let me give a shout out again. Peace to Brother Ujawu and to Vernon Williams. He says, when you enliven a nation, you enliven the people, correct? Yes. And that's why I think that when you see the seated man and seated woman next to a place name, it's just talking about it's talking about the nation personified. You know, for example, like, you know, when we reference America, sometimes we'll say her, right? And while, you know, she is a pronoun referring to the feminine gender, you know, we understand that America is really an abstraction. So when we talk about a country, when we talk about, you know, a state, these are abstract concepts that encompass a variety of things. Of course, there are physical land features and borders for which encompass the state or the country. And then, of course, you know, we wouldn't consider it a state or a country if it was not populated by people, right? Like, you know, we have to refer to Antarctica for the most part as a continent, a land place, but it's not really, even if there are some people that go in and out, it's not really known for people just living there, right? It's not like a populated place. It's not a government place. There's no governmental state called Antarctica, right? And, you know, so when you, of course, enliven the land, you enliven the people on the land, but you also enliven the animals and the insects on the land, right? So you got to remember, and this is some nuanced context that isn't always discussed, and that is, what is the role of the king? The role of the king in traditional Africa was that he was the chief rain maker. He was supposed to be in a relationship with the deities and would bring about rain that would nourish or enliven the land. Water is the most important thing. And so by enlivening the land, by making the fruit to grow, by making the animals to live, you in turn make the people live, because the people are reliant on the animals and the land. And then from there, you can build an economy. So you revitalize the economy of the people. So this is what is encompassed by the state. So you can represent the state either by pictures of people or by the land itself. And this is an example here, although a rare example, an example nonetheless. Shout out to our good brother Sanjetti. Shout out to Jehuti Ma'at and PR and 42 Tribes is in the building. And Giant Curve asked the question, asarimhotep, can you comment on the great hymn to Aten? Is the translation correct? Their skins are distinguished as thou distinguished the foreign peoples. People are talking about, yes, that is correct. And we've addressed that numerous times. And so, when it comes to this ancient Egyptian or this ancient Kemet question, in reference to uh, the whole concept of race, right? It is not so we don't argue that the ancient Egyptians did not recognize skin color, right? We're not dumb, right? And the ancient Egyptians weren't dumb. And even if you didn't have understood the writings in the text, you could clearly see that they understood and could distinguish the skin colors of different people by looking at their drawings of different people. The ancient Egyptians compared to the Asiatics, compared to the people of Nahisi, right? It clearly informs you that they understood that people come in all shapes and sizes. The question that has to be asked is, did the ancient Egyptians classify groups based on their skin color? That's not the case. There's no evidence of that, including themselves. And so that's the question. So we don't argue that they didn't recognize different skin colors. And so, we always bring up the hymn to Aten in that sense. So I hope that brings clarity, at least from my position. Hotep's nephews is really okay. We talk to Keith and Jetty. Peace and blessings, Jane Montego in the building. Negus, peace. Vernon, let's get some speaking into entertainment. People that would have put it in alternatives like they always do. Indeed. Yep, the two lands says it all. And peace and blessings to you, Cat. It's important to note the anticipative used as a pronoun shown earlier. If referred as people, then they would be the pronoun used and not it. All right. See. Indeed, more grammar than dictionary. Learn the vocabulary of the dictionary. Again, if you move on to grammar, not even language is possible. Indeed. If you, let's see, Mutual Obasa says your archive is not extended in the field. That's what we write. Um, and see, Social Dilemma podcast. He just goes from podcast to podcast trolling. And so we welcome you to the Mbongi for all your trolling pleasure. Peace, blessings to Brother Obama. And peace and blessings to Christopher Withers. He says it's also applied to statues. Indeed. So you got to remember when it comes to statues were the home or the meeting place, I should say, of the spirit for which the statue is supposed to represent, right? So when you see like to enliven the statue of someone, they don't expect the statue to get up and start walking. spirits to come from the spirit world, so they can be there for you to talk to them or for them to talk to you, right? And let's see. He says, the live and sustained state has been shown to be true for unpowered indeed. And I think I answered this question already. Um, I'm still scrolling down. Indeed. Yeah, that's what it sounds like he's trying to argue. And so we've already addressed it in the time period in which we addressed it, and it states what it states. There's no way around it. See, when the cat sin day and s it her. The translator took liberties on that, not the scribe. Indeed, and so that's what people got to understand. The so I may just because I may have to go to the old TLA to to find this one. So what I'm going to do is uh, what I'm going to do is I'm gonna let me find it on the old TLA. See if I can find the see if I can find the text, and I'm going to let me translate here. Um, so let me stop sharing this screen. Right, I'm going to remove it from now. And for y'all that's seeing two Asars or an asarimhotep, remember I'm on here twice. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to share the entire screen. All right, so y'all can see. And so let me look here on. Uh, so, all right, so this is the old TLA. And so we're reading here, this is, they try to translate this as the Egyptians, uh, thus in German, die Egypter, right? And this is from the papyrus London, aka the papyrus Kahun, Hymn to Sesostris III, line 5, right? So I right clicked and translate it to English. And sometimes you'll see like there's a little link here. Um, and so I'm going to click that. So hopefully y'all can see it, right? And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy that text right there, and I'm going to go to a different screen. I'm going to translate for the German, right? So this is what they state in, so hopefully y'all can read this for yourself, right? Now, it says Kemet is again written with a person determining form and determining plural lines so that the country's inhabitants are again meant, not the country as such. Compare the commentary on line 3. However, the suffix pronoun after Shenu makes it clear that grammatically the singular word Kemet, Egypt, is present, right? So the translators at the TLA is conflicted, right? They think that because you see the seated man and the seated woman and the so-called, because they interpret every three lines as plural strokes. They think that everything means plural every single time you see the three strokes, and that's not the case. So because they see those classifiers at the end of the word Kemet, that's why they think that it's referring to Egyptians, and thus people who think that Kemet can be defined as the black people, they translate this as the Egyptians or the black Egyptians or the black people, right? But the TLA they had to note, like the grammar forces us. We can't make that argument grammatically. The grammar is clear on this. The way that Kemet is written, and the way that in terms of its word itself, independent of the classifiers, and given the suffix pronoun that Egypt refers to. Excuse me, that is referred back to Kemet. You can only write it as Kemet in the singular. That means the state. So this is the fundamental issue here, and this is why you got to be careful of when these groups translate, because sometimes they be interjecting things that are not there in the text. Well, it could possibly be this if we squint our eye and think about it this way. Well, if you add this, then it could mean this, and they take what they think is fact instead of seeing what is exactly in their face and reading it for what it is. And then going into other texts to find precedents for the interpretation. Because as we stated the last time, so let me go back to one of the previous conversations, right? On the seated man and woman glyphs. Let's go back to this. So hopefully y'all see from the slideshow. So this is the slideshow that we did the other day, right? And so this is from the text, toponymy on the periphery, classifier problems in place names, right? Or that's kind of the subtext of the greater uh, text. So it's place names of the Eastern Desert, Red Sea, and the South Sinai in Egyptian documents from the early dynastic to the end of the New Kingdom, right? So the author, Dr. Cooper, states regarding place names, and he says that is because the etymology of the place name now has no inherent meaning when it is used as a proper noun. So what he's saying here is that it often becomes difficult trying to find the etymology of place names because once something becomes a proper noun, it's the word's usage is no longer the same as when you use it in everyday language. So if I was to say Houston, Texas, 99.9% of y'all would not be able to tell me what the word Houston means or how to break that down, because we don't use the word Houston in everyday language. It's just a proper name. Even when you use, like, if your name is James or Dorothy, in English, once something becomes a proper name, a proper noun, the meaning is often lost. So this is what we have the case with a lot of ancient Egyptian place names. So this is part of the facts that you got to keep in the back of your mind when you're trying to attack this problem, such as the etymology of the place name Kemet. So let me continue. It may be given in a different classifier. So once a place name, once a a word has been attached to a place name in ancient Kemet, sometimes then the classifier, aka the determinative, is changed. So, for example, if Kemet did derive from the root Kim, meaning black, this could possibly explain why you would never see any of the color determinatives. So I'm giving a boost to the opposite side here, the opposite argument, right? So there's even more complications to this, which is why we just can't go with our first mind when doing research. We got to do in depth and we got to cover all bases. So it continues. But the same toponym could have different classifiers depending on a host of variables, some of which would have been reference specific. Or, in other words, however a scribe understood the place name affected by the classifiers they chose to append to the toponym. So it is, so not only is it possible in terms of the standard canon for the classifiers to change once a word has been used in a place name, then you have the added difficulty of these rogue scribes who just say, you know what, I feel like terminating this word with this classifier or these set of classifiers. And I'm not going to explain why I did it, right? So we continue, and he states, these, now, he talking about the classifier, these unpronounced graphemes are important for an understanding not only of the larger principles of the Egyptian labeling process, but also pertinently to this thesis. Remember that this text was Dr. Cooper's PhD dissertation turned into a book, right? For demonstrating the Egyptian efforts to categorize geography by using certain classifiers. That is key. So they're letting you know that a lot of the classifiers there is used to let you know where in the geography that this refers to. Which is why, for example, you see Kemet 99.99% of the time terminated with geography-based classifiers, which lets us know that it's referring to a type of land. So let's continue. This process of classifying places reveals how scribes ordered places and accordingly how Egyptian elite culture conceived of their world spatially. Conversely, these signs may also reveal different scribal traditions and paleographic tendencies rather than having any inherent effect on the meaning of the lexeme, right? So this also can work against the opposition. So I gave you a bone with the last citation, but this one kind of takes it back because we can argue that you have a rogue scribe who put some classifiers at the end of the word here that has nothing to do with the word itself. So if you see Kemet with the seated man and the seated woman, it has no bearing on the definition or in relation to it. That's a possibility that we would have to weed out through the research process, right? So this is why, again, research takes a very long time. And you have to take note of these different things because this is what you have to prove and disprove in the research process. You have to eliminate these hypotheses as possibilities so that we can get closer to the truth. We continue. While Particular toponyms regularly employed the same classifier. The classifier for a single toponym was subject to change due to a variety of complex considerations, including textual medium, for example, the papyrus or monumental inscription, the date, the locality of the inscription, and what may be considered as scribal preference. All of this you have to keep in mind when you are talking about toponyms. It's not that easy. So, for example, this is why in this example, in the word eret, seketi, or seket, I don't know why they put tu here. This is one of those translator liberties that is being taken. It's simply eret, seket, not seketi. And we discussed this in the book and the like. But this is a workers' settlement. That is actually how Hanning defined it. A worker, the place of a worker settlement. So you can't, so this even contradicts how Hanning even transliterated the word, because it would have to be the people of the worker settlement, not place of the worker settlement. So he's acknowledging here that it is a place and is not referring to people. But here we go with this word, this place name, with the seated man and the seated woman hieroglyphs, right? And in the text, this is a transliteration in the German, and in the text, it states here when the king, when the messenger is reading the royal decree, it says, and I'm gonna read from the bottom. As a matter of fact, I'll just read from the top. Royal command to the overseer of the pyramid city, vizier, and overseer of the 6 houses of Anshu. Behold, this command of the king has been brought to you to inform you that the king's sealer of Upper and Lower Egypt and the overseer of the fields of the southern city, possibly the son of, I think that part was kind of damaged, Ibiayu, has come pleading with these words. So now he's quoting the king. Impundent, in my house are transporting people of my household. So that word people here is remech, that you see right here, remech. So we know it's not people because they already said the people. Remech of this place where are transporting people of my household, taking them away taking them away from one place to another, to Ayat Sektu, or Iriat Seket. So we see here that this is another text, although it's not Kemet, it's still a place name with the seated man and seated woman, and you can only read this knowing the grammar of the script and the context, that this is a place and not referring to people. So the reason why, and this is what I argue in the 2023 text, the reason why you see the seated man and the seated woman glyph here is because this collectively is referring to serfs, Muriet, to serfs. And so this is a workers' settlement, a serfs settlement. So it's letting you know this is a settlement of serfs. Why do do y'all know what Kahun is? When we talk about the Kahun papyrus, do y'all know where Kahun is? Kahun is another worker settlement. So just like what we see in Ariet Saket being a worker settlement, this scribe decided to place the seated man and seated woman glyphs to indicate that this is a worker settlement, not that these are Egyptians or whatnot, because the hymn to Sesostris was for the king to come to this place. And although they're referring to the state, the location for where the text was written impacted how the scribes used the classifiers. So let's go back to that statement by Dr. Cooper, right? So he says, while particular toponyms regularly employed the same classifier, the classifier for a single toponym was subject to change due to a variety of complex considerations, including textual medium, papyrus or monumental inscription, the date, the locality of the inscription, and what may be considered as scribal preference. This is the complex nature for which we have to have this discussion, and why you got to type all of this stuff out and addressing every single one of these issues so that we're only logically left with what is the most probable interpretation of the meaning of Kemet. And so I'm going to stop sharing my screen and let me go back here and 1 second. Heard someone come on, so let me go back to the screen. Let's see when Brother Smash came back.
Yes,
Welcome back to
sir.
the Mbongi.
So I'm glad that we could dialogue directly instead of from video to video about this. Maybe we can get somewhere a little bit quicker. A lot of things I heard, I'm like, I don't understand how you understand it. I'm not gonna come out the face and say you directly wrong, but I see, it appears the problem is if your analysis limits Kemet to only a toponym, then you can make your hypothesis work. But we know that Kemet is not limited to being only a toponym, and the time period that we find it, there's only a few attestations before that. And in all of those attestations, they let us know that they're not talking about the whole country. So if we really looked at like Sinaway is right in the 12th dynasty, right with Sinro said. He says they have the land of Aamu and we have Kemet. Now, the land of Aamu he was talking about was Avaris. So in that point, we have a textual indication that Kemet that Kamos had was not the all of Egypt. You see what I'm saying? Now it still would be used toponymic in that sense, but it is limiting down the understanding of Kemet. When we look at what was it, the eloquent farmer, the eloquent peasant who he said he wanted to go down to Kemet, we start to see that some of the earlier attestations, we need to understand first that it possibly was not all of Egypt, the whole place of Egypt. And as it emerges, I think that's like the third or fourth time that we see it written. Maybe you could correct me if I'm wrong. And then we see it with the people glyph. So at that time, there was a word Kemet that merely meant black. There's a word Kemet that referred to cattle, and limited to only a toponym is, I think, some of the problem.
Yeah, I addressed that in the book, and I'm going to address it uh, more deeply in this revised version of a journal article that I'll be submitting. And this time, I'm including an internal cognate of the word Kemet and showing how that it really referred to the the initial reference was to the land on both sides of the river before you get to the delta.
So when you say that initial reference, you're talking about the one they say goes back to a person named Mena or Mena.
No.
Okay, which one are you talking about?
I'm talking about all of them. Like that's what it's referring to in a literal sense, and it is that which becomes the name of the state. Just like when you talk about Idebwe, because technically you can say Idebwe doesn't include the delta because it's not there's no river banks in that sense, like they separated for two lands
Mm-hmm.
in a literal sense. So you come from a literal representation to the abstract regarding the state. And so, and for me, it's not even a. That's kind of y'all going back and forth with Unc uh, and Garfield in terms of, and I heard, I believe it was Karakuni who, in terms of their recent interviews, who was making that argument that it didn't apply to all of Egypt and the narrow space and all that other kind of stuff, which really isn't in relevant necessarily to my etymological debate, but it's an important for the conversation nonetheless. Anything else?
Yeah. So talking about that, you said all of them when I tried to cite the Mena for the first attestation. Do you have more than 2 attestations of the Kemet, maybe 3, with the canal glyph?
Yes, it's a whole bunch of them, but they're like what's his name said, they they're kind of concentrated in the Madi Hamawat area, but there's multiple locations where you see it. So there's more than 2 or 3 at that station. There's way more
on
in
Kemet?
23. Yeah, of
N23
Kemet.
is on Kemet. Oh, okay. Are they
So
cited
in
in your book?
23 and in 36.
Are they cited in your book?
Yes, they are.
Oh, because I only got the smaller book that was directly talking about Kemet. Are they in there? Because I couldn't find them in there.
No. Not the one that came out in 2019. So that was just to address, some kind of major points for the debate at ASCAP. Like that was just designed to have the conversation at ASCAP.
I just
But
hit
the
the link
deeper,
to what you was building. I ain't trying to hold you up because I do got some stuff to build on. If you're still doing your presentation, I can just watch from the chat. But I just thought it was open to build.
I don't know. I'm done with the presentation. So this was the time that I invited any and everyone to come on the panel or to ask questions in the chat. So you cool.
Well, so what you were saying?
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know what I was just saying now, but roughly, I was just saying that the 2019 text was just a kind of an introduction to the argument that we were making, so that people at the ASCAC conference could be clear. So we had it done for the ASCAC conference.
So in my argument against y'all stance, I claim that you guys have less attestations of Kemet with the N23 plus or N36 than those who argue that Kemet means black people have or Kemet with the people group. Those
Hold on.
amount to about 7, the ones that they try to say is a collective term. You saying you got more attestations of it with the N23 than it is with the people glyph?
Yeah, if I find two attestations with the N23, that would be more than the Kemet with the seated man and seated woman glyph. And so I'm only counting the source. When I say the attestations, I'm talking about the sources. So it's in that one source, it's two, maybe three times. That third one is cut out, and that's kind of a reconstruction from modern Egyptologists. But we definitely can confirm the other two that's in that third or fifth place.
Well, that papyrus, when it was found, it was like cut into two, and one is called Kahun, and then another section is called Gerbron.
Yeah.
Gur. No, not Gerbron. Gur. I think it's Gurob. Gurab, maybe. Right. And on that second part, there are some we should look at, and because there are more chemists on there, and the scholars really put a question mark next to it, because in this instance it is one seated divinity man with three plural strokes right after Haka. And I could share those, but for me, having other instances where we find Kimu, which all scholars say would be an abstract way to say blacks. We also find those attestations, coffin text 189G, where it states that Ka Enek Kimu Tepiuta is saying something about he has ruled Kimu, not Kemet, but Kimu. And then it has another text corresponding with it, which says Kemet in the same slot. And this would possibly be an attestation to whoever wrote that, seeing Kemet as a derivative of Kim, where you could say Kimu, and then as a scholar told me, this would give us the black ones. And so I don't know if that's throwing you off, but that's something to look at.
Yeah, I'll have to see because I know that there's other, like I said in the 2023 book, I I go through all the major dictionaries in German and in French and in English, and wherever they have Kemet or Kim, I put it in the text along with the citations for where many of them can be found. And so I state that although I did my initial analysis, the next thing is to go through all of these, one by one to see, because you'll see different forms of Kemet. Like there's a Kemet in one of the books of the dead that has a deity um, determinative, after it in terms of the place name Kemet, right? I showed in the text that there's in a demotic that is Kemet with the land, the Tunga land glyph, as well as the house determinative, the place determinative in the demotic text. Like there's so many different variations. And then, we got to distinguish if some of these locations are referring to uh, ones that specifically refer to places in relationship to the bull and bull deities versus Kemet in reference to the state. Like all
Well,
of that has to be done. I'm sorry, go ahead.
if the second Kemet with the seated people and the three strokes, if the second one you were referring to is the one that's in the TLA, that's definitely not toponymic. They translate it as Egyptian speakers. They are some people that are on the boat, and it is a Kemet with two people and three strokes and an 049, and it is translated as Egyptian speakers. The context are they are in the Mediterranean in Byblos, and someone is taking a message to a boat. And so they are indicating strictly when they say Kemet in that sense, some people. That's the second use of it in the new TLA.
Alrighty, and I think that one, because remember this, my 2023 text was done in 2021 for the most part, and the second TLA came out after the book was to be published. Um, so, like I said in the earlier part of our conversation, like this is why you can't say never, because like if the TLA is the only, and I'm not talking about you specifically, but I'm just saying in general, if the TLA is the only place that you're looking for attestations of certain texts, then you can be blindsided because there's a lot of text that's not in the TLA that you would have to go into museum libraries like I do. You know, like I'm a staple here at the University, the University of Pennsylvania Museum Library, right? So there's they have an Egyptology department, and they have a whole wing because the museum has Egyptian artifacts, so they have a whole wing of Egyptology texts. And I can tell you that a lot of those texts you're just not going to find on the internet. And so, you know, until they digitize those and put them like in the TLA, or if there's certain text that hasn't just been published yet, but they're sitting in the archives of various different museums. So I always have an open mind to possible other attestations. So I always say up to this point, you know, based on my research in this, there has not been an attestation of yada 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 yada. If that is what I'm arguing, and I think that people need to keep this kind of language in their discussions, because the TLA might come out tomorrow with a text that says, you know what, I'm black and I'm proud, using Kemet in it in an ancient Egyptian text, and then you know I have to abandon the whole book.
Nah, they know new stuff come out, but I feel you. That's something to look at. That those people on the boat called Kemet, they say are the Egyptian speakers. I know that's an anachronism, but we do have a language, Rani Kemet, that may be associated with the way that they was talking about it. But again, you do acknowledge that Kemet came into the lexicon not as a toponym, as just to say black or even black cattle before they was talking about it as a toponym, right?
No, not necessarily. And so there's nuances that like when you study language and linguistics, that's another layer of issues that you have to consider, because all indications of, you know, and I know you're going to disagree with me, but just hear me out for the sake of conversation, that there are different speakers and dialects, speakers of languages and dialects in the territory of ancient Kenya. And just because you don't see something appear in the record until a certain time doesn't mean that it wasn't being used as such earlier than when you attested it, or when there's an artifact that has that written on the media. And one of the ways that we can tell if it has always existed is when we start doing historical comparative linguistics. Because if we have distant languages that have the same term and is used in the same way, that has no interactions whatsoever with ancient Egypt, and we can, based on regular sound meaning correspondences, can attest that this is an inherited phrase or word, then we know that it has always been there. So it's a possibility that, for example, some word didn't appear until like the Middle Kingdom because the speakers of the Middle Kingdom weren't the dominant group at that time. So their language was not recorded then. In the Old Kingdom, when there was a different set of rulers and speakers who spoke a related language, they used another word that is the same word but a dialectical variant of the same word. These are the considerations that I had to keep in mind when making my argument. Is this a possibility? What evidence do I have for that? What evidence exists against this hypothesis? So, like I said, these conversations are nuanced, and it takes a lot of time and research to go through all of these things to falsify these hypotheses.
I ain't mad
So,
at that. But, you know, I don't think that would only apply to the term Kemet, even as we analyze it. That would apply to the term Kemet for cattle, too. We might find it on earlier attestations because of its links to other languages as well. So when we're just dealing with what we have found in primary accounts, we have to say that it emerged, or well, at least from the attestations I've looked over, that it emerges as a term for cattle before it emerged as a term as a toponym.
you know, that's a possibility. And, you know, I would love to see a detailed analysis outside, independent of an argument with Brother Up and myself verbally on YouTube on it with citations and methods and all of that other kind of stuff. That's what I like to
Well,
do.
I ain't charge you for not having my book, but I'll send it to
I
you.
got your book. What you
I was
talking
about
about?
to, my new one you
I
got?
got your book.
Okay, shout out.
Yeah, don't
I'm gonna
listen
have
to
to
me.
grab that new one. Yeah.
Even if I disagree with you, I'm gonna buy your shit.
Well, you know what
So
my
I,
argument is. Then I mean, you know,
yeah,
and I don't lay it out in that regard. Now the things that y'all beat up the cattle, how Brother Reggie brought it, but after we look further into that, is a lot more into that probably need to be looked at. I got that one chapter called "The Remnants Are Cattle," and it got plenty of attestations to let us know that that's not just. I understand that we to push the hard line on that, but if we look, that's not bush BS. There's a lot to that. And that will give some understanding, at least to the hypothesis that Kemet was looked at as a divine black herd, because we already got the divine black herd in the cattle. And so when they took on the name Kemet, it possibly may be something behind that.
look, it's all possible, and as I state in my text, and even just before this text, the last one that was published, what I've been stressing is the phenomena of paronymy. And paronymy is this belief that words that sound alike must necessarily be connected. And oftentimes, like in linguistics, you got to understand that some words merge because they sound alike. And then in especially more prevalent in more ancient cultures before writing was really the staple, they would create culture and philosophy and ideas based on words that sound alike. So it's possible that you have a word, Kemet, that deals with cattle, that's independent of a word, Kim, that means black, that is independent of a word, Kemet, that means refers to wetlands. And because at some period of time, they began to sound alike or they sound alike, ancient Egyptian people could have merged their concepts together. That's a possibility, and that's something I mentioned. But you can't assume that off the bat. You have to go through a process of analysis. See, I know you're a battle rapper. Y'all like to get at it. I'm more patient. I like to look at the whole picture and then make my decision.
I know you're a battle rapper too, but
I used to be back in the day. See,
like, come on,
I,
man.
I wasn't. I just wasn't famous. I didn't. I didn't. I was living in the South, and at the time, the only people coming out of H Town was the Ghetto Boys, and even though they're Port Arthur, Underground Kings. There were some other groups that y'all may not know in the public, but at that time, it just wasn't heard of. You would have had to move to LA or move to New York to get known. So I mean, that's my path. But I went into college and I've been stuck on this academic stuff ever since then. But if I have to go back, I would. But that's not my stance academically. I like to keep it. I like to keep a level head
Well,
so that I can catch.
I'm gonna tell a hard for more than two attestations of it with the 049, and then I reread y'all book on it, and I didn't see that cited. And now you say it's in the new book. I know you easily gonna be able to show more than the three attestations or whatever of it with the not 049 but N23 and N36. Because I
Yeah,
want
and I even give statistics in the book, and I say that there's a hierarchy. The most dominant, of course, is going to be 049. 049 takes like 98% of the forms of the word kin. That last two, if I go 97, 98, 3%, is all the other forms that we see. So there's going to be there, but it's not going to be the dominant.
But 049 ain't what we think, man. 049 indicate the people more than we think. Less than the buildings in the town or a city, and more like the gathering of the people. This is at least in my hypothesis. I know yours is different, but because when we find ruins or desolate or old cities, they use something that looks like a 049. It's the X without a circle around it. And I know it's not the same thing, but it's how shapes seem to appear the same. That when they're talking about a populated city, we got the encircled X, and when it's desolate and ruined, we have an X without a circle in it. It kind of indicate that it's some people thriving there. Now, I don't know. I got this one
I don't know
text.
about the people part, but I do agree that when certain signs are encircled, it marks a territory, like a space. And a good example of that is, so when you see the star symbol by itself, it's just dua, the star. But as soon as you put a circle around it, it's dua, the underworld, the place, right? And there's a few more glyphs that operate in the same way. Like that circle demarks a location. Now it could be people there, spirits. I mean, we could have that argument, but it definitely indicates some location.
Well, that's true, but we got these texts. I don't know if you want some share the screen. I see Song Jetty in the chat. Peace to Song Jetty. I ain't seen you in a minute. Wow. But I'll be watching some of your teachings at the shrine. Don't believe it or not. When I see them. I just got
No,
this one text.
if you want to share your screen, go ahead.
Yeah, hold up. This is one I'm a hinge on, and I'll send this screenshot of the whatever is coffin text 189G, and it was given to me by a scholar. Let me see. And I want to see if I could get this on the screen. It's just a simple hakat enough, but the way that they say it here is very different. But every time I open it up, it closes back down. So hold up. Window. There we go. Do you see? Yeah, that right there. This one.
Yeah, I see it. Hold
Oh,
on a
I
second.
think this is a very good text, and it's just simply if we start on the left, farthest left hand column where we see the Haka Inek Km.t Ta. I don't know if you've seen my video with Jonathan Winterman, the epigrapher from UCLA, but we looked over this text because of what another scholar, a quote he gave me for this in my book. I just wanted to get their opinions. But one I ain't gonna just try to go too deep into it, but one thing we notice is the first column we have a Kemet with the 049. In the second column, and I'm just going to go off of Kurt Seth's reconstruction. That's whose work we can find this in. On number 1 footnote, he proposes that there is a Uchik here, which would give us Kimu. And if we look at each of these texts, they're basically different renditions of the same sentence said by different artisans. Now, if we look at what's in the final position above this divine man determinative in column 3, we also can see a Uchi. And then in column number 4, it appears to be the same way. And this is kind of like matches one of the other Kimus I talked about in the Ran, the other part of the Kahun papyrus, where they have a term Haka in that Kimu, and then they have a divinity like this, and then the 3 strokes as well. Now, before we, I just want to add what I think we know. If we look back up at this third column of Haka in Ek, we can clearly see the ruler was also indicated with a divinity. Oh, I'm sorry, y'all ain't seeing my mouse. Now you can see my mouse. I'm sorry. So if we look right here, yeah, I have my mouse on the other screen. We can see that he's indicated with a divinity as well as the Kimu that he is talking about. But when we come down to Tepe Utah, those who are upon the earth, they use a regular A1 determinative for, I guess, the normal people who are not divine. So the first thing to note about this is that the Km.t with a 049 seems to be, from the mind of this artisan or scribe, interchangeable with Kimu. And first, so these are the same scribe in column A and column B. Column C and column D is the same scribe. And column E, I guess, is the same text in a different coffin. But he wrote it with the Kemet with no 049. And so I was showing this to show that there seems to be a term Kimu, which grew off of the root of Kim, right? Which would indicate Egyptians, because in column 1, they're talking about, okay, Haka and that Kemet, but in column 2, they're indicated as some sort of a divine people, just because of the use of the divinities after this Kimu here. And we could talk more about, what Kimu would actually mean, as the scholars say, will be the one who is black. And so if this was in plural, that would be different, if indeed the Kim meant black. But I don't know what you think about this text.
Yeah, I'll have to go over. I have to look at and see what the entire text context is, and then come to that and see if we can. And I'm assuming this is on a monument. You said, correct?
Coffin text. So there's 3 different
Yeah.
coffins. Yeah. It can be found right on the Oriental Institute coffin text. It's spelled 189G. But and so at least sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just saying. So I can. It's the context for me, so I can see in the other text, like with the Kahun papyrus earlier in the text, even the in the same way.
But I could, you can't. It seemed like you came back after I said that. Go ahead.
Okay. What I was saying is, like in the Kahun papyrus, although they use a different word than Kemet, the state was still personified, and they use the masculine singular for form of a top, and so it's stuff like that I look at, so I can see what's the pattern of the entire text instead of just that little excerpt. So I look forward to examining the argue. What is? You said my internet's going in and out again.
It went out, but you back. You back.
Okay. So yeah, I look forward to it.
Word up. I don't know if nobody else is gonna hit the link, but I'm still listening. I'm about to mute.
Yeah, it doesn't look like anybody is, so I don't want the show to be too long. I can't do the 6-hour show like y'all do.
Yeah, well, all right. Thanks for having me. I'll tap in. I'll probably go live after this or whatever. All right.
No
Peace.
doubt. All right, man. Peace. All righty. Well, I'm on the spot. I can't see too well. So if there's not, oh, well, we do got one more. We got a good brother, Sanjetti, who joined the conversation. Peace and blessings. Welcome to the Mbongi.
There we go. All right. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. All right. Let me just take this off. All right. That's cool. All right. Yeah, I was just doing some studying and working on this calendar project, so I, couldn't jump in right away. And I see, Brother Jonathan was in. So I just wanted to let y'all have y'all dialogue. But what I was getting ready to put into the chat is that we all can agree that racism is a construct put together primarily by Europeans and by extension Arabs. All right. Well, actually, I think Arab ideology regarding racism predates the European, but for our purposes, we'll just say the Europeans. Well, if that's true, then terms related to race cannot be used to define African terminologies that predate it. And that was one of
Not necessarily.
I was going to put into the chat.
I want to say it like this, because we got to understand that, of course, we're speaking a different language than an African language, continental African language, and more specifically the ancient Egyptian. So if we, of course, exist in a later time, we would have to use the language that we speak to reference ideas and things, even if we have records of the past. So I wouldn't necessarily say that you couldn't. I would just say more so specifically that, every group has its inner logic for categorizing and synthesizing and demarcating aspects of reality that is unique to them, that may share some there may be some congruence with other groups, but fundamentally we want to at least give every population and group their own inner logic to how they demarcate, integrate, and categorize their reality. So when we're talking about groups of people, the ancient Egyptians had their way of categorizing and distinguishing themselves from other groups, including other African people.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a different type of demarcation and categorization than what we find later on in 17th century Europe. But it's not that you can't say, for example, like, since we ain't going to have the debate, since Garfield be running, shots fired if you watch it. The race of the ancient Egyptians debate, right? All a race means is family, or a category or a group. Race exists, whether it is in terms of its social construct. All groups have a way of identifying and grouping themselves and distinguishing from others and other folks. What's unique about the way, so I'm saying that to say that the humans, by definition, had racism. It's just unlike the 17th century Europeans, their racism wasn't based on skin color, but they had racism. So, for example, when the ancient Egyptians called themselves the Ramesh, the people, the humans, but when they referred to the Asiatics, they referred to them as the Amu. The word Amu goes back to a word meaning cattle and roamers. And you can interpret this two ways that are related to each other. That these were nomadic herders and or that these people were uncivilized. Because they were like cattle, they were like animals.
Well, I will argue. All right, so I will argue
the Asiatics.
Oh, shoot. All right, can you? Okay, so I will argue that they didn't have racism. I will probably, while I agree with the premise, I would say that they're more like nation centric. But I think like as far as the overall
But that's
point,
still a race. That's so
right.
this is what we're going to do.
Right. What I'm saying is so that it doesn't create confusion. Well, I mean, I know what you're saying. Oh, I think you dropped off. All right, you there? Hold on. Testing. Okay. I'll just wait for you to come back in. But what I'm saying is, they're looking at themselves as, those who are civilized.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Can y'all hear me in the chat?
Oh, I can hear you now. You fell off.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. So, because usually when people say racism, we have the our modern visuals and in the past say 500 years worth of experience. So then we'll take some of these definitions and put it back, on ancient people. But in this case, just even with reading the text, and I agree with you on the Amu, of course, because they're making an association with people who act like animals or with no discipline. You know what I'm saying? So, and we know that race is about a group. You're just talking about really a group. So I don't disagree with the premise. But when we're having conversations with people, our modern ideals of racism is mixed into the pot, and then the conversation becomes more difficult. So now when we look at Kemet and it being translated as the black people, so when we say, well, that's not the definition or the etymology of the place name, people get offended, of course, for their own reasons, saying, well, it's almost like you were saying they're not black people. And then we get this visual response, that we're experiencing from a good number of people now. Unless we have to redefine or clarify what's meant by race. If we're going in that, if we're going in that direction. Okay. I think you had like 3. You came up 3 times in the I don't know, you there? Okay. Let me look in the chat here. Smash. Okay. I'm just looking in the chat, see what's happening here. I think Asar fell off. Hey, put a 1 in the chat. Can anybody hear me?
Are you there, Sanjetti?
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah, I'm here.
Testing.
Yeah, I'm here. Okay. All right, we're good. All right, thanks, y'all. Yeah, I think you have fell off. Anyway, you got. It looks like you got the slide up for the etymology of the word race. The second now.
All
right.
Can Sanjetti,
can you hear me? All right, I think the people can hear. All right, all right. So while Sar's come back in, I'll just go ahead and read. But y'all can still hear me, right? Let me see. Tamika, push 1, Tamika, if you can hear me. Push 1. All right, I know we can't hear Asar. Asar, I think you fell off. Okay, all right. All right, I'll read what Asar put on the screen there. So race, 1560s. People.
He says I'm breaking up though.
Okay. All right. Good. Yeah, we can hear you. Go ahead and read it.
Let me do this.
Testing. Testing. Can you hear? Can y'all hear me better in the chat? He said we could hear the bird glyphs. He said we hear me and the birds. But okay, so I don't hear, if Sanjetti is still on, I don't hear you. And I'm looking at your mic and it's muted. So we can hear you. So they say we can hear. Okay, so I just switched to the other computer. I think what is happening is, because I was on my cell phone, it's saying that the cell phone was getting warm, and that's what's probably causing all of the problems. So, you know, hopefully the internet doesn't drop out here. So as I said earlier, I'm outside, actually just down the street at a park. So so hopefully this is better. And so yeah, I'm on my regular microphone, but I can't. Yeah, so if Sanjetti is talking, I can't hear him. His mic is. I'm looking at the bottom of the screen, and his mic is muted. But he would have to unmute his mic. So so you know, while we're waiting on Sanjay, I just wanted to let me remove that real quick. I just wanted to kind of emphasize what I was saying here in regards to the concept of race. So as you can see, like from the online etymological dictionary, what race really means. So it's people of common descent from the 1560s, people descended from a common ancestor, class of persons allied by common ancestry, from French race, earlier raza, race, breed, lineage, family, possibly from Italian raza, which is of unknown origin, cognate with Spanish raza, Portuguese racia. So for those of you of Generation X, y'all remember that that Latin hip hop rap group that came out with a song. I don't know if it was in the late 80s or the early 90s. It was for this is for the raza. When you're talking about this is for the raza, this is for my familia, this is for my family, this is for my group, right? So that's the same cognitive for the word race. And so etymology says no connection with Latin radix, meaning root, though they admit this might have influenced the tribe nation sense, and race was a 15th century form of radix in Middle English. Yada. The original sense included wines of flavor. I'll skip that. Then it goes into race theory and all that. But it has to deal with race, breed, lineage, family, possible ancestry. It's a grouping of people. And so we got to understand from the standpoint of we got to understand from the standpoint of how the term is used. The term is being used correctly. The problem is that race began to be, I should say, anthropologists and other scientists were trying to find a biological basis for race. Every group groups other groups into a family or a lineage, but that does not mean that group bases on skin color like the Europeans did, and then added on other features like hair texture and nose and lip size, etc., etc. Race is just another word for grouping. So you can't say that race doesn't exist, but then say families do exist, that lineage exists. They're synonymous. Race, all of that. That's the dangers of borrowing words from other languages and we don't understand it fully. That's all a race is. It's a grouping, it's a family, right? But to try to have a diehard biological basis for race, you can't do that in a very strict and scientific way. So if I go to Sudan and I say there's a race of people there that are giants, and I'm talking about the Dinka and the Nuer and those other groups, I would not be wrong and say that they are a race. That's how Europeans use the term, even amongst themselves. It could be a whole other nation that could be related to each other biologically, but because they are another group, another family, there's something that distinguishes them from us, we consider them another race. Now, it's once you start trying to make our natural human groupings based upon superficial social distinctions and try to make it a scientific, try to find some mathematical formula for race, that's when you get in trouble. But the ancient Egyptians were as hell.
And that is
so we got our good brother.
Oh man. All right, my brother. But yeah, so
so now
point. Yeah, so that last point is more of my context of the modernization in a sense of say the past 200 some odd years, outside of the definition given here since the 1560s. So with the 1700s, 1800s, the way they were using their ideals of racism against us and others who are not Europeans or Anglo-Saxon in a sense, then just the context which I was using, that we cannot take that and try to retrofit it back into ancient times. But of course, you have the different groups. Human beings have always had various distinctions. So yeah.
Hey, peace. We got the Shemsu Heru research.
Shemsu
Heru research team has formed Voltron again.
In the building.
Hey, I wanted to it's good conversation. I caught it very late. I came
Go
here
ahead.
earlier, and then I was on dealing with Garfield and trying to clear up some things.
Okay.
But on the race thing, on the racial issue, yeah, both of you. I mean, I'm on the same page because when I first entered, even back when people were talking about race in terms of reparations and stuff, in that conversation, I was bringing up the point of race as an act of categorizing. And every human, humans, ever since humans been humans, we've been categorizing objects and people, and it comes down to um a self versus other, and that act of doing that, of perceiving a collective self versus a collective others, is an act of categorization, which is what a race is. So I think the so nobody's confused about that, is when we say the modern social construct of race, it's not to say that race is a modern thing, but it's the modern construct of it, where the schemata is different than how ancient peoples did. The criteria that they were using in ancient times to say self versus other, and so on, is not the same as we have since the 16th century. And I think that needs to be highlighted so that nobody gets confused about it.
Exactly. And I want to address, just piggyback off of what you just said, but address the comment that is being shared, and that is so they're asking, or stating at least, but as we saw in the hymn to Aten, they spoke of skin difference, and again, it being able to acknowledge the differences in skin and skin types does not mean that the ancient Egyptians themselves categorized and labeled the other groups based on their skins. That's what we're saying. Again, we don't assume that the ancient Egyptians were blind. And if they were blind, that would make them more magnificent. Because how the hell you blind and building pyramids and writing in hieroglyphs and writing and drawing on the walls and things, right? That's not what we're saying. We're saying that they.
Oh man, he was in a roll. Oh man.
Oh,
yeah. But so to that point. Okay.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Back in. You dropped off.
No, you can go ahead. Yeah.
So even in that hymn, if I remember, and again, I'm just going off of my memory here. When it says about to the hymn of Aten, it says, "and making their skins different." There's no idea of a hierarchy in that hymn regarding skin color, and I don't think that can be used to justify the misdefinition of Kemet, the place name meaning black people. So it's not even related.
And that actually is, that's the crux of the matter that we are often leaving out of the conversation when we talk about race, is the assumed hierarchy of life and value based upon the skin color and whatever other distinguishing characteristics that one group has against another. That you don't see in, at least I haven't come across it in the ancient Egyptian literature. But I'm sorry, go ahead, Brother Ujamaa.
I was going to add to that by saying that also, I think what's not highlighted in these conversations is the fact that throughout human history until today, colors are used as a categorization tool. So it's like an umbrella or file folder system where things become associated with colors in order to organize them in their worldview, as far as a form of ontology of a people. So for us today, red is associated with anger, lustfulness, destruction, danger, and whatever the case is, those items that I just named are not literally the color red, but there's a figurative association to red, and we put them in that category. And so even with the hymn, that's why even the word for color is also the word for the nature of something, the characteristics of something, you know. So because there's a perceived differences among population groups, obviously the hymn is going to say that if Aten is the creator of all humans, and they perceive a difference between a self versus an other, then obviously they're gonna say that these people were categorized. And that's just that simple. It has nothing else to do. It's not really related to the arguments of us retrofitting, you know, this modern construct backwards on them. And it goes to what you were saying. They have eyes, they perceive these things. And so to him, is going to have to explain. It's an explanation of, well, how these other people get here? You know, if Aten created them or created everything, then you also have to explain everything that you are engaging. And so that has to be understood in that light.
You can see here. Well, I can read. We can do read. I can read here.
Right.
Yeah. So
I got you.
I'm trying to find the transliteration and or the actual hieroglyphs, but this is what came up first. But I just want to show an interpretation, you know, for so that we can read. So this is the part of the hymn that the person was talking about that I highlighted earlier. So this particular section of the hymn says, the countries of Syria and Nubia, the land of Egypt, thou settest every man in his place. Thou suppliest their necessities. Everyone has his food, and his time of life is reckoned. Their tongues are separate in speech, and their natures as well. Their skins are distinguished. As thou distinguishest the foreign peoples, thou makest a now in the underworld. Thou bringest forth as thou desirest to maintain the people of Egypt, according to thou madest them for thyself. And of course, it's European translating this, all these thuses and thous. The Lord of all of them, wearing himself with them, the Lord of every land, rising for them, the Aten of the day, great majesty. So what this seems to me, really, I can't say it's the first, but it's one of the earliest anthropological texts in existence, where he's simultaneously recognizing that there are different groups of people that are distinguished in many ways. One, by their location, they're different places. Secondly, by their language, they have different languages. And then it says by their nature, their character. But ultimately, what I would translate as their different cultures. There are different ways, their inner logics of doing things, but they'll say their natures. And then, you know, right after it says their skins are distinguished. But there's nowhere in this text where it says anything to the nature of, you know, the blue people, the red people, the white people, the black people. They just generally acknowledge that there's different people with different skin tones. There's different cultures, and there's different locations for which these people are located. And that's all according to God Aten's plan, who put them there and made these distinctions. Or in other words, God is the reason for diversity.
Yeah, I think that's so on point. Another takeaway from what you, another takeaway while you have it on the screen is I want everybody to notice that Egypt is juxtaposed against two other places. So again, we have the toponym Egypt here. It's not referring to people, it's referring to a place. And so it's saying the countries of Syria, Nubia, and Egypt. And I have the actual glyphs if you want me to share it if you need it. But it's talking about
Oh yeah, I
like you
can.
said, other than
Let me know
other
when
than
you're
what you
ready, and I'll
said.
stop sharing.
Okay, well yeah. Go ahead. Let me see if I can share this. Let me set it real quick first. I'm not sure
I
how.
want to thank each and every one of y'all for listening and rocking with the Mbongi. Make sure that y'all support the channel. Make sure that y'all like the video, share, and continue dialoguing, ask questions, whatever. So again, whenever you're ready, just let me know. Oh, I see it already. Okay.
Yeah, I'm sharing it. So yeah, this is only to highlight what you already said because that was 100% on point.
Okay.
I'm just highlighting a side note here, and if you all look, I guess I can better tell you from column. So if you're looking from the right hand side, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So if y'all can see my cursor, this 8th column, and I scroll on down, you'll see these countries mentioned, and you'll see here where Kemet is mentioned. We have the I6, the X1 with the braised bread loaf, and the 049. And that variation of a spelling is here juxtaposed against 2 other countries. You got Kash and I believe the one for Syria here with the repose line and repose position, and then the fan here for Kair, or the word for Syria. So those are there. So I'm just letting I guess emphasizing that we're talking about places here. And I think that's a very big, it's a small thing, but it's a very big thing that's impacting all these conversations for the past 2-3 years, is that one conversation is dealing with the place name Kemet, while there's other conversations talking about other Kemets. And I don't think that distinction is made enough, because there's not a single word Kemet or Kim. There's multiple words that are Kim, that we pronounce it as Kim, which is two consonants, a K and M, and then Kemet. The adjective, if it has to be feminine to form a concordance or agreement with a substantive that it is attributing, then it will need to have a T added. So that's where you get that Kemet. But then you get the place name Kemet, where the place is through the abstraction and place morpheme is morphed or realized on the surface as the bread loaf, which is a T. And that is that.
And if I could, help to elaborate on that point. So to the readers, when you're looking at the column, can you put your mouse around the that column again? So
Okay,
yeah, right. That column there. So to people looking, you see the structure that has like 3 peaks on it. So that's the N25 mountain range. So this will help you with sight words. So you see you have 1, 2 of them. I believe there's 3. Yes, there's 3 of them preceding where Kemet is. The top of them Kemet. So this can help you to recognize words actually really quickly. When you look at the classifiers or determinatives, that'll help you to see the words faster, instead of trying to read the entire text just to get to one word. So, and then another point is, Umoja was saying that there's multiple words with the KM sequence. English works the same. Pretty much all languages work this way. So let's just say, for example, we have 3 words, 3 different words in English with the TM consonantal sequence. Now, one of them is a name of a person. So you have Tim. So you put the I in there, you have Tim. And then there's the word time. And then there's another word, team. Now, you wouldn't look at these words as being they're the same word. These are three different words that share the same consonantal sequence. All languages have these features, or at least the languages in study. So Kemetic is no different. Of course, we're focusing on this one word, but there's multiple words with the arm, water sign, and placenta sequence for Ankh. But of course, we're only pronouncing the consonants as we see it now. But all of those words don't mean life. So I hope this analogy helps. So there's various words with Km in it. So yes, there's an adjective, Kim, but then there's a different word, Kim, that can mean like to rise, etc. But it has nothing to do. It's not the adjective. And because we have sensitivities, which is why this conversation keeps going on and on and on. Let me see.
Indeed. I'm not.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't understand this. Are you saying that somebody is making an argument that the Egyptians were the most black or the most whatever? Who are you citing in regards to this particular argument? From what I get for the hymn to Aten is that they're showing. Well, they only list three in this in that section, 3 places. So Syria, ancient Kemet, and Nubia, so to speak, right? So this idea they're just giving 3 locations, in their immediate facility, and noticing that there's a distinction between them. So even if the ancient Egyptians were closer in color to the quote unquote Nubians, the Nubians were greatly distinguished or distinct from the Syrians, right? And matter of fact, I'll have to find that slide, but there's a video that I had that I took a screenshot of when this was back in 2015 when I went to Egypt for the second time. And at that time, it was some war going on in Syria. And in Syria, of course, when there's war, there are refugees and people trying to escape the war. So many of those people in Syria in 2015 found themselves in Egypt. And many of them found themselves as far south of Egypt as Aswan. And they were living in the Nubian village. And it was so crazy that, like, when I was on the cruise boat and going down the Nile and I was videotaping, you see a bunch of, saying dark-skinned Egyptian brothers and sisters just on the Nile chilling. And then you just see this, it just interrupted by this pocket of pale-skinned Syrians there in Nubia, right? In a Nubian village. And like it's night and day when you see a Syrian next to somebody who lives in Aswan. But that's exactly what they're stating in the text. Like the ancient Egyptians, by our standards, will be considered black folks. But they were lighter in color than the darkest of the ones out of Sudan. Darker, a lot darker than the people out in the Levant in Syria, in that area. Right? So they're acknowledging the distinctions in terms of color, but they do other types of acknowledging as well in terms of language, in terms of culture, as well as location. So that whole hymn has to be kept in context. Anybody else want to add or say something different?
No, I think all the points were made.
Yeah, I think that's good. You know, we gotta do this again.
All right, indeed. I'm gonna end this program because it's going on 3 hours now. I think that's an hour over what time it should have been. Actually, if left at its own devices, this show would have actually been over in less than an hour.
Mm-hmm.
But I hope that those of you who are listening were able to gather some information and some further context and clarity on both sides of the argument, and that this would encourage you to look deeper into the conversation that we're having, and of course getting more details if you purchase the book Race and Identity in Ancient Egypt Volume 1 towards an etymology or the meaning towards the meaning of the place name Kemet, and for which you can find on my site at asarimhotep.com or on Amazon, yada yada. And hopefully we can get Brother Ujamaa to take a break from starting trouble on those other channels and hit us with that grammar book that he's been threatening us with for the past couple of years. And I know Brother Sanjetti is working on his calendar book and having that published, so we can get that soon, so I can invite both of y'all on just to talk about y'all books.
We got the calendar project coming out. Actually, I was working on it when you started the show. So yeah, it's gonna be the next level. Next level. We actually need to get ready to do a show on it to talk about just to talk about the calendar itself. Get y'all ready, because this is the next level
already.
And I have to say, with the grammar, I'm actually glad that I did take a break from it, because of the work that Mbongi is doing or has done. Is forcing, I know it's going to force me to change the way that things are explained. Some of the things are explained, it is what it is, but the way it's explained, it could be shaped a little bit better. So I'm looking forward to that. So that's going to take me a while just to even digest.
I'm holding the book right in my hand right now.
All of that.
Same here.
I'm going to continue battling on this word Kemet, though.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it already changes the way that I'm teaching the Metanetra class, by on the first and second level, So yeah, Ujaa, I feel you. It changes how we're explaining things.
Yep. And when I first came into your channel, because I came late, I was scrubbing. I went back to the beginning, because I wanted to see what you were saying. So I was way off in my comments as far as
I was showing to him. I was showing to him to the dial. And I saw your comment hey, make sure you show the hill to the dial. And I'm like,
right. That's,
and I know there's a time delay, so I'm like, he may be scrubbing. That's
we knew he just came in.
Yeah, but I did wanted to say, that was good because of the when you showed the anaphoric point back to Kemet and that s that suffix pronoun, and I saw that what people started to try to say is that that's a scribal form of sin, and whatnot. And I just want to say this for people who are studying: when you look at the primary text, try to look at it as best you can, but in a single object, you can it will help you determine if there's an error or if there's a shortened form, et cetera, et cetera. Look at how much space is around the text. If there's extra space, because if it's squeezed, then sometimes they will abbreviate. But then look at the other text and see if see if sin is consistently represented with just the folded cloth. Because if it's spelled out in the same text by the same scribe, then likely that hypothesis is wrong. You pretty much have to rule that out, that they actually did mean S, or just the folded cloth alone, and not, omitting the water ripple and the 3 strokes in the plural form. So always keep all this stuff in mind. And in the Kahun papyrus itself, there are many instances where sin is spelled all the way out. So I don't think that hypothesis or argument is tenable.
And it's because of that. Well, in addition, in terms of other arguments, why I believe that Mbongi is wrong on that point. Because the way that the sentence is read, you can only read Kemet in this place, in this instance, as a toponym, and not he's trying to give way to an ethnonym, and that it's referring to people. And I'm like, this ain't it. And frequency of words is a big thing in linguistics. So we know, for example, our primary word in English for fire is fire. And anytime we want to refer to that element, we use the word fire. That is our native word for it. And anytime somebody is going to refer to that element, they are going to use the word fire. Now, the word pyro is cognate with the word fire, but it's a borrowing into our language. And we only use pyro in a very narrow sense, and really kind of in the form of the word pyrotechnics. And we don't use the word pyro in the same way that we use the word fire, even though they're technically the same word from the same root, but the latter being a borrowing into English. And so the frequency of the use of a word helps linguists to determine what is the natural word and also what is the borrowing, along with the regular sound meaning correspondence. So if you only find this word in one text out of 3,000 years of history, and then you don't even find a singular of the word Kim to mean person, that's problematic for the argument. And then what are the dialectical variations of it? Because there's dialectical variations of the word Kim in a variety of forms. That's why I went through painstaking efforts to look for dialect forms. And I know that for a fact. So what he's trying to make an argument is that there's a root Kim that became the word rim in Remech. And in that one example, because of course he's doing exactly what Diop did. And this is what I highly do not recommend y'all in the listening audience to do, is to simply base your entire analysis on dictionary entries. Because the dictionaries can put you in a bind sometimes. The dictionary entries need to always be in conversation with the primary text. Because the primary text will give you the proper context on how to interpret how the word is being used. So that's how I know, like, if we was to go back to if I add this on the screen, no, it wasn't this one. I had to share my other screen. Right. So if I was to go back and share this form here of the word here, this place name here, right, where it says, well, I say irit, but some might say iat, saket, but the entry in the Hanning dictionary has iret saketiu. But then he defines it literally as place of worker settlement. That's a contradiction. Because if this was truly a Seketiyu, it would be talking about those who belong to the place of the worker settlement. So the dictionary entries can be confusing. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say that's another point. I think people really need to slow down and study what demonyms are, and the establishment of a relationship between a population of people to a geographical territory. They have to understand how that is expressed, and the formal word for that is demonym, but then different languages structure their morphology and within the syntax how they execute and express that. And I think that's the problem people have. They can't differentiate between a place and a people when a relationship is established and expressed. Because I know when I was scrubbing through your video earlier, you were talking about instances of the word sa'unk and how you can enliven a state or whatever the case is. And so I know you were only talking about the word sa'unk, which is to enliven, or whatever, to cause to live or enliven. But if we were just to use the plain old protect, we all know that the king's job is to protect the kingdom, Egypt. And so it's no problem. Like, people can't say, okay, you're going to protect, like, you don't protect. It's assumed within all that context. The expression is you're protecting, obviously, the Egypt and everything about it. Its people, its borders, its territory, everything that makes Egypt what it is and make it living and thriving. That's what you're protecting. And these things are expressed in those ways. Even uniting. Like when they say unite the two lands, you're not literally taking the ground of the earth and smushing them together to unite them. So people got to understand how these things are expressed in all languages, that you're uniting the two lands, but it's not a literal, a giant person taking his hands and squeezing Upper Egypt and Lower Egypt together to make them into one. That's not how that works. But that's when people are arguing, that's as if that's what they're trying to interpret as. It's not like that. So people got to understand those things.
Yeah, so like to kind of add on, like the king not only is in charge of protecting the land. So usually when you hear the word protect, you're thinking, and I'm not saying literally you, I mean us in general, that he's defending the land, defending it from threats, outside and internal threats. But as we can see with the Sa'unk examples, that is not simply, it doesn't only speak on protection, but also includes the flourishing of the land in terms of the economy, in terms of the people, like all aspects of life in the territory is given vitality. That's what ultimately Sa'unk is to give vitality to a place. And so everything is fine. The clubs is hitting, the food is hitting, the girls are fine. Everything is enlightened. I mean, enlivened, because of his presence. But when you have bad leadership, the country becomes fragmented. Thus, the opposite of the union, of the uniting of the two lands, is the fragmentation of the population, of the people themselves, of families. Matter of fact, I don't know if it's not a tale of the Sanuhe. Which one is it where it's talking about, I think it's during the first intermediate period, that the brothers are fighting against each other, killing brothers and stealing food from one another.
Was that like a first intermediate period text?
Yes, the first intermediate period text. I don't know if it's a conversation with the man and his ba, but you know, they're talking about how, you know, the conditions are so bad in Egypt that people are starting to rob each other, and that, you know, father and son are I'm sorry?
Okay. Yeah. The admonitions of Apuwer, I think.
Ipuwer, yeah. So, you know, that's a good time to learn the opposite. That's what was going on in the first intermediate period is what the king was trying to prevent. And there's some scholarship out there that argues that the first intermediate period was the result of some previous droughts, quote unquote, or the Nile River not rising to a particular height where the country could prosper. And so, as I stated again, the king is responsible for bringing water. And here's a little secret for y'all. This is why the symbol of the bee is used for the king, because, you know, this is a common thing in Egypt and even in the Levant, in the Middle East in general, where the leadership would talk about making the waters buzz and roar like the bee. So when a Nile is flowing and you're hearing the rushing waters, it sounds like a gang of bees going by. And so the king takes on the moniker of the bee, the so-called Nesu Biti, because all kings in Africa are rainmakers, but they didn't have rain in ancient Egypt. So he had to have the relationship with the Nile River to make the Nile River buzz like the bee. But anyway, that's another conversation for another day. But what I wanted to point out in this slide before I take it down is that the contradiction here by Hanning is clear. Like if I was to say, for example, I wrote on a piece of paper New York, and then I put in definition the people in New York. Or I should say, hold on. Like if I wrote down New Yorkers, right? But then I put in parentheses the place or the state of New York, right? That's equivalent to what this dictionary entry is doing. He's putting here New Yorkers, but he has in parentheses the state of New York. New Yorkers and the state of New York are two different concepts, although related. New Yorkers refer to the people that pertain to the state of New York or the city of New York, if you want to narrow it down to New York City. But New York is a place, and that's what is actually written in the script. New York, in quotes, right? But he puts here New Yorkers, if y'all can get the metaphor here. Mm-hmm. So this is why you got to be careful about the dictionary entries and go into the text to see how it is written. And so I don't have the graphics up here. This is the transliteration from the TLA. And so the TLA puts tu instead of tu and for Saket, and it should just simply be Saket. That's what's written here, Saket. Right. Anyway, go ahead.
My last thing I want to point out is why this rigidness that people have is causing some of the problems, and people really have to take a step back and understand figurative associations and literary rhetoric, and how it works in all languages. So the example is the phrase "Sama Tawi," and everybody understands that to mean the unification of the two lands. And as I said, that's not a literal squeezing of the of two geographical territories and squeezing them together and making them united.
Mhm.
It's referring to uniting people on those two areas, two regions. But the interesting part is when you look at the word Sama Tawi, the word Tawi doesn't have people determinatives on it at all.
Mhm.
But we understand that it's not literally uniting lands like the dirt itself. You're not squeezing dirt together. It's referring to something. And this is what people got to understand and not be so rigid and just slow down, because a lot of stuff is just being is a wasted time of people not having these basic understandings of how these different aspects of language and how it works. Because I saw the brother in the chat said that Simatawi is talking about the people, but yet in that phrase you're not going to see the people glyph. You're going to see the strip of land glyph twice, which is a dual, a masculine dual, Tawi. And even Ta is spelled with the N23, by the way. If people don't know, Ta, the word Ta is spelled with N23, which is people associated with water, but yet it's land and defined as land, Ta is land. So that's a whole nother conversation. But I just want to point that out.
I found an entry of land, excuse me, of Ta meaning land and country, but the determinative is that of the Rhodes Scroll for the abstracts.
Mm-hmm.
Which,
yeah, well,
which you know, I'm doing another presentation showing that the three strokes and the abstracts can represent the abstract and can substitute for the scroll representing the abstract, which are both can substitute and represent a place, like I showed in that one example. But
okay,
but yeah, I mean, your point is clearly made, and you know, hopefully, you know, more of these conversations come, it just becomes second nature to our listening audience, you know, to understand. But I want to address this statement here, where it says bees are in the lower area. Bees may be anywhere, but you got to remember that the ancient Egypt was made up of different kingdoms at one point. It's just like in modern day China. When you speak of China, you think of China in a singular. But before China was united in the way that we think of China now, there were like 4 or 5 different kingdoms. And there was different languages and or dialects, what we're now calling Chinese, or languages related to Chinese, that is actually still spoken there, but with Cantonese being the lingua franca of China. And so if you can understand ancient Kemet from a similar standpoint, that there was other kingdoms there. And so you have different words for the word for ruler and king in the language, because that was the word that was used in the dialects and or languages that were being spoken in ancient Egypt. So ancient Egypt is a convergence zone. And they started to mix and mingle certain terminologies, and that's why you get in the uniting of the two lands, because the working hypothesis is that at minimum there was at least 2 kingdoms that was united by Narmer or Menez or whoever in Dynasty 0 or 1. That gives us, you know, and out of tradition and conservatism and respect, they always paid homage to that fact, and which is why everything's always divided into 2. The 2 kingdoms, the 2 shores, the 2 banks, red and black, you know, whatever. You know, it's this typical dualism, you know, in Africa. But I'm sorry, it sounded like you were about to say something that I interrupted, Brother Ujamaa.
no, not at all.
All right. Brother Sanjeti, you got any last words?
No,
I'm sorry.
I'm good.
About to say something?
Yeah, nope, I'm good. We're good to go.
Okay. Brother Ujamaa?
No, it was a good show. I was scrubbing. I caught up, but there's a little part I missed, so I'll probably just review that part. But it was good in the continuation of all these different talks. So I look forward to the next one that you do.
Indeed. Well, I do appreciate each and every one of you for joining the conversation and for your questions and comments and even your trolls. Shout out to Brother Smash for coming on the program and providing some more of his perspective on this issue. And thank all the supporters and all the people who liked the video and shared the video. But shame on you if you have not liked the video or shared the video. And hopefully we'll do this before this program ends. So until next time, we will see you all later. And God bless y'all and goodbye.
Y'all wanna know that? What's up? Feeling like I dropped the draw for and caught Uno. Came to kick the door with the game man judo. Pin game low, that's why they give me kudos. Inspired by the 3-0. 595, check it for pack flight. Hit the turnpike, slide to a baseline. Gotta sound like I just hit the 85. Oh, I'm so ready, by enemies necessary. We gon' be legendary, hold up. About to grow the payrolls. If you see the vision and you're with it, you should say so. Cause we about building, elevating the millions.
Yes, that's it. Listen, you know, just the relationship that been fostered with Dr. Jeffries and others, it you know, started with Dr. J about 20 years ago. Actually, it is 20 years ago now. And you know, through him, I met this person, that person, this person, that person, and the relationships were just building, you know, and Felicia and Brittany and Ken and everybody just all came together. Met Saw through Sister Raketi Yaman, Dr. Raketi Yaman, who suggested we reach out to Saw to help us fulfill our vision in the Happy film to make the linguistic connection between the Seshmetu Necho, the language of our ancestors in ancient Kemet, and Wolof and other African languages. So she said Asar is the person you want to talk to. So hats off to Asar. Brother Asar does an excellent job with that. One of our foremost scholars in that field. I'm just honored to be a part of this experience.
This program was created with the love and support of all our Patreon members and subscribers. If you are not a member yet and would like to see more content like this, consider becoming a member today. The link is in the description of this video. Your support is greatly appreciated.